Well, it's that time of year again. The summer is back and England are back. They return with the urn to take on our Australians, and the Aussies couldn't be more excited and keen to win back the Ashes. Now, we've done all the hard work for you and compiled all the information, numbers, stats, highlights, and much more. So sit back and relax as we bring you the most comprehensive preview of the 2013-14 Commonwealth Bank Ashes Test Series.
First up, we'll take you through the form guide, which tells us the records from 2013 and the form which these two teams are currently in. Now, both the Australian and English teams have played a total of 10 test matches each so far this year. Australia have only managed to win one, and that was against Sri Lanka in Sydney at the very start of the year. And since then, it's all gone downhill for them, losing 4-0 in India and then losing the Ashes most recently in England. While England's story is the complete opposite. They've had plenty of success, winning 5 of their 10 played tests with no losses. As you can see there, Australia have won just the one test series this year, while England have won 2 of their 3. The last time they met over in England earlier this year, England won that series 3-0, and the last Ashes series in Australia was back in 2010-11, where England won that 5-test series 3-1. Let's just jump across to the one-day form. Now, this probably doesn't have as much of an effect on their form in terms of Test cricket. However, it is the most recent form that both these teams have been in. Obviously, with Australia just returning from a one-day series against India, and England coming off the back of their own one-day series against Australia back home. Australia have had much more success in the one-day arena in 2013, winning 12-8, while England just a little steady, going 10-10 this year, including the making of the Champions Trophy final, where they went down by just 5 runs to India. However, their last 10 matches tell the story of how these teams are going much more clearly, with Australia going 3 wins, 4 losses, and England 4 wins, 4 losses, with a few no results in there to balance out those numbers. Now, as I mentioned, Australia's last 7 matches were over in India, where they played in one of the most outstanding series of one-day cricket you'll ever see. The pitches were made for batsmen, and there were runs galore. It was as entertaining as cricket can get, and India has always been renowned for its exciting cricketing brand. The fans loved it, we loved it, and just check out some of these highlights. Maxwell getting on the act there, massive shots from him, another one. He was outstanding during this series. Shane Watson put down the order in this match, but he was firing massive shots. Batsmen loved playing over there, and it was a crazy series in that regard. Alright, let's take a look at the teams now, which will go into battle in the coming months. England have brought a squad of 17 down under, and they consist of James Anderson, one of the world's most dangerous bowlers, Johnny Bairstow, Gary Ballance, Ian Bell in the middle order, Stuart Broad, Michael Carberry and Alastair Cook. They've had ideal preparation in the tour match. Stephen Finn, Monty Panesar, Kevin Peterson, always dangerous, Matt Pryor taking the gloves and the vice-captaincy, Boyd Rankin, Joe Root, Ben Stokes, Graham Swan, he's going to be dangerous, we'll look at him as well, Chris Tremlett, and Jonathan Trott. So an extremely powerful looking squad there for the tourists as they prepare to defend the urn. However, they'll have to go through their opposition, Australia, if they are to be successful, and their team hasn't looked as well structured since, I reckon, the 2006-07 series. Finally, they found a group of players who all look the part in the baggy green and could well be a force in this Ashes series. Now, the men are George Bailey, finally making his way into the Aussie Test team and earning his baggy green. Michael Clarke, the captain, of course. James Faulkner, Brad Haddin with the gloves, and he'll take the vice-captaincy too. Ryan Harris, Mitchell Johnson with the ball. Nathan Lyon, Chris Rogers, Peter Siddle, the workhorse. Steve Smith, David Warner works his way back into the team, and Shane Watson, still subject to fitness, but should be good to go to play in that first test at the Gabba. Now, Michael Clarke had a few things to say at the official launch on Tuesday. Just take a look at what he says about the England squad.
I seen Alastair Cook yesterday at Remembrance Day ceremony in Sydney, and fortunately enough, he gave me their team as well for the first test match. So I know he hasn't announced it yet, but I thought this is a good opportunity for me to announce it. And the team that we'll be playing against in Brisbane in the first test will be Carberry, opening the batting with Cook, Trott at 3, Peterson at 4, Bell at 5, Root at 6, Pryor 7, Broad 8, Swan 9, Anderson 10, and Tremlett at 11. Now, he doesn't exactly know that yet, but I know that's the 11 that is going to take the field in the first test, so we can start our preparations as of today.
Interesting move there from Clark. Take what you like from that. George Bailey, what a remarkable story. He's been the talk of the town, and finally he's been rewarded with a baggy green cap and an opportunity to play in the first Ashes test. Let's take a look at some of his statistics. 14 first-class hundreds at an average of 38. He's amassed just under 6,000 runs with similar figures in List A. However, his most outstanding statistic by far is his one-day international average of just under 55. Now, that's a truly outstanding stat, and it's all thanks to some very impressive form over in India. Let's take a look at the numbers from his 6 innings over there. He scored 85 in the first game, went on to make 92 not out from 50 balls in Game 2. Backed that up with a solid 43 the next game, and then an impressive 98 the game after. Game 5 was abandoned, though it didn't interrupt his form, walloping 156 off just 114 balls. Unbelievable. Unfortunately, he ran himself out for 4 in the final game, but that didn't take anything away from his incredible form over that entire series as takeover captain while Clark was injured. From his last 20 one-day international innings, he has an average of 64.27, and you can just see here why that is. He's such a powerhouse. He was brutal down the ground, over the top of the field. However you like, he was the Indian team had no answers for him, really. Shots to all parts of the ground, and unfortunately only 1 century came of it, 2 90s, but he was unstoppable. Runs everywhere. He was seeing it like a football, and he was having a ball, you can tell. Look at that. Some incredible shots. He was seeing them well, finding the middle of the bat. John Inverity, chairman of selectors, had a few things to say. Here's what he said.
I mean, his performance in ODI cricket has been, outstanding. I mean, since he started 18 months ago, he's been our best performed one-day player in terms of average aggregate runs, strike rate. He's just been outstanding. So it's a thrill to see him coming on and playing so well.
Now, David Warner is another player who has captured the eyes of the selectors, especially after his Ryobi Cup form, where he scored 3 big hundreds in 4 successive innings. This came after a fair bit of controversy during the English summer, but he has bounced back once again, as he always does, and has proven himself once more. His 1 innings against Victoria of 197 was the standout, smashing 24s and 10 sixes, mind you, as he passed the record for the highest Australian domestic limited over score by an individual. So massive things for him there. This is the scorecard. We're going to have a quick look at it and then have a look at some highlights of the England tour match where they played Australia A at Bellerive Oval in Hobart. Alastair Cook and Michael Carberry, the 2 England openers, went all out on the Australia A bowling attack. They were way too good, simply unstoppable. They were playing shots to all parts of the ground and making the Australia A team look very, very poor. Middling pretty much everything. Carberry loving to go down the ground. There's another one. He loves the aerial route. And there's Alastair Cook. He gets to his 100. Michael Carberry not too far behind him. And they both retired on 150 each at the end of the day, as day 2 and 3 were rained out. There's Kevin Peterson. This is day 4 when play was resumed. Trott out as well as the English team started to tumble a little bit. Balance also gone LBW as Australia A's bowlers started to get back on top. Root ended up with a 50 and unbeaten as well. Pryor out there, 26, bowled by LBW by John Holland. Broad, big hit out to Khawaja on the boundary, who takes an absolute ripper. And that ended their innings as they declared. Doolan got in as well. He made some runs. Klinger was with him there. He was a bit slower to start. And Khawaja gets a ripper from Anderson. He'll be a force in this English team. Klinger getting some more runs before Graham Swan dismissed him. and he'll be very important. Graham Swan will look at him too. Shaun Marsh and Ferguson got a few as well until stumps was called on day 4. As we take a look at the scorecard, Cook and Carberry, as we saw, 154 and 153. They both retired after batting out a beautiful day 1. Root 58 not out, and Pryor with some runs there. Some good preparation for both of them. And 7 for 430 was the score that England declared on, with Cutting taking a couple as well as Holland. They dug in deep on day 4. As Australia A took to the crease for 31 overs, they managed 3 for 119 in the time that they had. Doolan, Klinger and Marsh making the runs out in the middle. And Anderson and Swan with the ball now. As we saw Swan take a couple of wickets. Look at this turn that he got in Lords. He really troubled the left-handers, and he'll be a huge part in their Ashes campaign here in Australia. If he can find this sort of spin in these Aussie pitches, which we will be quite certain we will, he will be quite hard to stop. And look at what England did to Australia with some of Swan's expertise. They won that first test by a very mere 14 runs at Trent Bridge, with the Aussies just unable to chase down that total of 311 in the first test. Lords was where Graham Swan tore up the field and absolutely crushed Australia, as they were dominated by the Poms, 347 run victors in that one. However, the third test was an epic one. Australia stood up once again, declaring in their first innings. However, a slow run rate by England caused some controversy, and a bit of rain and poor light helped them along to a draw where it looked like Australia could have snatched victory for the first time in the series. The fourth test was won by England by 74 runs at Riverside Ground. Stuart Broad was an absolute monster. He took 11 for 121 for the match and absolutely dominated the bowling for England and knocked Australia over. And England took that win there. With the fifth test, England had already won the Ashes. It was just a matter of Australia getting one on the board or England winning 4-0. None of that was the case. It was a draw in the end, as the scoreline finished at 3-0 England's way as they retained the Ashes. Fun fact, 447 runs were scored on the last day of that fifth test at the Oval, which turned out to be the most runs in the last day of an Ashes test, which just went to show how good of a series it was. It just capped it off nicely. Okay, some Ashes statistics here in Australia. We're going to run you through some interesting findings which will give you some insight into what to expect from these grounds this year. The 5 traditional venues are the Gabba in Brisbane, the Adelaide Oval, the WACA over in Perth, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, and the Sydney Cricket Ground. So firstly, let's take a look at that first column, which has graphed the match results at each ground, whether it be an Australian win, an English win, or a draw. Now, these are all taken from past Ashes results, and it's quite obvious and clear that Australia have had the best luck on their home grounds, winning approximately 50% of the matches at each venue. Australia have had the highest percentage of wins at the WACA, being the one ground that England have had the littlest of success on, winning only a tiny portion of the results played there. However, England loves to play in Sydney. They've won close to 50% of their matches there, including back in 2010-11. And also, interestingly, Australia's least successful ground to play on is Sydney as well. So let's skip over to the results from the toss. This basically explains what the winning team did in their first innings at that ground. So it's a constant trend that if you bat first in Australia, you have a higher chance of winning the match. Shown most evidently at the Adelaide Oval, where 68% of wins have come from the team batting first. Although the WACA has been a little different, they're 50% either way to both first innings batting and bowling teams. So here's the itinerary for this Commonwealth Bank Ashes Test Series. The Gabba, obviously the first test starting on November 21st, as we head over to Adelaide for the second test, December 3, and then we wagon over to the WA, the WACA, the third test, December 13, and then the all-famous MCG Boxing Day test, the fourth one on the 26th, and then in the new year, 2014, the fifth test in Sydney on January the 3rd.
However, that's all we've got time for here on Austral Sports. I'd like to thank you for your company. It's always great to have you on board. And of course, this series is going to be an absolute classic. We're always excited for the Ashes. It's always going to be a great series. It's always a blockbuster. And we can't wait. Bring it on. We'll see you next time.